Selfless and the Blitzcrank. And I don't think Kaiwing plays those, so I expect PSG to ban out the Thresh themselves.
Well, let's go ahead and get into our first draft. We have AHQ on your blue side, PSG on the red, and already Tank not going to get his pocket TFT. Not TFT, Twisted Fate. His pocket Twisted Fate that we've seen throughout the course of the split. Alongside that, River not going to have his Nidalee.
Yeah,
I like
actually,
it.
Unsurprised with the TF ban, of course. It was his debut champ. He did a lot on it. And then, yeah, we're just trimming out the jungle pool at this point. Zergoth?
I like the Nidalee ban because it makes Renekton less of a priority because the Renekton and Nidalee is such a deadly pairing. There is no top jungle 2v2 that can win against it right now. Nidalee is a great champion in the meta with how jungle camps work, so I really like the Nidalee ban, also dissuading the Renekton pick.
Yeah, definitely is the case here, as we are seeing more junglers being banned out.
Yeah, we're not going to see the set, which has been played very frequently in the jungle here in the PCS, as well as the Lilia and Graves being banned out from Kongya. But this has made it that the Caitlyn is available, and usually what we see in the PCS is a blue side Caitlyn ban. We saw it multiple times yesterday and through the course of our playoffs so far, and Wako gets to show himself on the champion for the first time.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Caitlyn, of course. Big hyper carry. Both of these AD carries are, you know, standout team fighters of their respective squads. But at the same time, Zergoth and I had this pre-game discussion where we said, look, blue side Caitlyn ban, I'm not a huge fan of it, but Zergoth understood that neither of these teams really like to play around bot lane early, which is where the Caitlyn really shines at getting the rest of her team pretty far ahead. What do you think about this Caitlyn-Ashe matchup that we're now seeing?
I think it's a matchup that's relatively still Caitlyn favored in the early game, but Ashe and her support will kill first right after 6. I'm really disappointed that I don't see the Thresh pick here, because I think Caitlyn Thresh is such an oppressive lane. It has so much safety, and I want to see AHQ pick up the Thresh here. Although I do like the Lee Sin takeaway, because with all the junglers off the table and the pool so pinched, Lee Sin also becomes a high priority for both players.
This would actually be a shock if this actually gets locked in, because we were mentioning that we haven't seen a whole lot of Lux play here in the PCS. We saw it out of some of our closer to the bottom teams that were trying to use it as those like last second, try and pick up a couple of wins here and there to try and make it into playoffs, but not from our big four, and AHQ looking to change that here in their first playoff game.
Yeah, so this Lux is basically a Morgana that you can maybe flex to mid if you really want. I'm not too keen on it as opposed to the Morgana though, because you don't have the innate safety of the Black Shield, but there is a little bit more utility when it comes to just reinforcing the trap line with a good snare. However, with a mid lane now locked into Uniboy, we need to see one back from Tank, otherwise he may find himself banned out, much like the mid laners of yesterday.
So for me, with the composition that AHQ is building so far, I would really like to see hard engage banned away from PSG. So I would like to see the Ornn ban, I would like to see the GP ban to get away those engaging champions or champions that can follow up on engages. And from the side of PSG, I wanted to see disengaging champions ban, specifically junglers. I think a Rek'Sai ban is doable, I think a Trundle ban would be justified if you're looking to pick up a tank in top lane. So far we're seeing the Olaf ban, which I think it's an okay ban if you want to dissuade the enemy from playing heavily towards bot lane in the early game, because Olaf has such a huge tempo advantage, but I would have much rather see a Rek'Sai ban and a Trundle ban. So one of those champions is going to be open, and I wonder if AHQ will pick either of them up.
We are, though, seeing from AHQ, not afraid to start hammering toward the support pool, and it's still kind of shocking to me that they haven't just straight up banned the Thresh. Maybe they're going to do that on the final rotation here, because I know, Braze, you've mentioned multiple times you're a massive fan of Kaiwing's Thresh. He's undefeated on the champion so far during summer, and Zergoth, like you mentioned, we're not going to be seeing that Trundle come out of AHQ's. It's banned out in the final phase here for PSG. A 5 jungle ban coming out from PSG. It looks like they said, all right, you know, Machi did it to the mid lane of J-Team, we'll do it to Kongyu, who's been the catalyst of AHQ.
You know, I was going to say, I am a huge fan of Kaiwing's Thresh, but not necessarily as much as I'm a huge fan of Woody's Nautilus. Then after yesterday, I guess Kaiwing's Thresh is the thing I like more here. Let's be real here. That being said, PSG is shaping up for a nice pick comp. You have situational engage between the Syndra QE, the Ashe R, the Thresh Q, the Lee Sin just full commitment wherever possible. And yeah, as we've clearly mentioned and clearly seen, just so many junglers out of the picture, and yet there's still one fairly high prio one still on the table.
Yeah, considering the Volibear has been kind of one of those fallbacks for Kongya, and he's actually been one of the more proactive junglers within the PCS. I find it rather interesting that it actually made it through. For the final pickup here for AHQ, looks like they just want to go with something that's kind of safe up in the top lane for a blind pick, but if you're looking at Hanabi right now, Zergas, as a top laner, what would you like to see?
I would really like to see the Ornn on the Malphite. I think Ornn is better than the Malphite, but I would want to see hard engage to break this AHQ comp. The Gnar comes out, which is a solid counter pick to Renekton in isolation. Has a lot of team fighting power, split pushing power, but is really hard to execute. I think Hanabi is the type of player that can pull this matchup off, but I still don't think it's the correct choice, but we will see in game.
Yeah, so you think Hanabi is the type of player to actually pull this off, but I think Ziv is the type of player to weather that storm and actually get through lane phase relatively unhindered. Looking at the Volibear lock-in though, we kind of didn't really mention it besides a throwaway, oh cool, they locked in Volibear now that all the other bans have come out. What do you think about the, just going to grill you while we still have the chance, sorry Circle, but what do you think about the Volibear coming in here for Kongyue, who has looked like the MVP jungler of the entire league?
I think the Volibear is a champion that can enable you to play aggressive in the early game, which is definitely something Kongyue likes to do. The champion is nerfed on 116, and the nerfs are quite heavy towards his movement speed on Q, which decreases his early ganking potential and late game engaging potential. I still think the champion functions in this team as a frontliner, and to enable the Caitlyn looks to just constantly push in. The matchup into Lee Sin is a relatively skilled one. So I think it's a good lock-in if they execute on the bot lane win condition.
Well, thank you, Zergoff, for joining us for Champion Select and for the pre-show. We'll see you after the game, but we're going to go ahead and load on in for Game 1 between AHQ Esports Club and PSG Talon. Top of the bracket, 5 games possibly today, what could easily be a final. I'm looking forward to it as we load on.
Welcome to Summoner's Rift.
And we get ourselves a bit of a repeat of what we saw back in spring. PSG, they had to go up against Nova, 2-0'd them, and then met directly into this exact matchup in their second round. It was up against AHQ, which they were able to triumph. It went the full 5 games, but they were able to take down AHQ 3-2. Now, though, we have questions, especially after that tiebreaker game, Abriz, where we felt like PSG, this team was sometimes way too inactive.
Yeah, and that being said though, right ahead of that tiebreaker game, we actually saw PSG just smash AHQ earlier in that very same final week. So definitely about as evenly matched as you could get between two very, very prominent top teams. Especially with the fact that we saw how kind of questionable Machi J team looked yesterday. These two, as you said, could be the finalists that we are seeing for the summer 2020.
It's going to be starting off here. It looks like just top side of the map clear. What do we want to expect, though, Abriz, out of AHQ during this early game? Like, what are your key thoughts? Where do you think they need to strike on the map?
So, we heard from Zergoth that with Caitlyn, you do want to play for kind of a bot side focus, and I think that will be name of the game for Kongyue here. But because he's not really known for playing for that bottom lane, I still expect him to afford some time to just unlocking Uniboy on this Zoe. Because once you get the Zoe ahead in lane against the Syndra, it tilts that kind of even matchup into very, very favored in Uniboy's court.
Yeah, if he's able to land one paddle star when he's ahead, it's usually not a fun time there for tank. And that has been a winning condition that they have run with this kind of comp before, back in spring even, when Kongyue was on something equally as tanky but had lots of CC. They always like to try and get Uniboy ahead. With the Ashe, though, they are going to be able to at least track where the Volibear is at least pathing to start things off, so they'll have a little bit of idea where Kongyue is.
Yeah, and looking over at this PSG win condition, ooh, some suspect health bars in the early game. Nice bot lane action that we were promised. But looking over at PSG, they have the hard engage. They can deal with this mid-game siege comp as long as they get on top of the priority targets. But here's some getting on top of each other right now.
Oh no, but Kongyue is going to get spotted out. Unfortunately, Kaiwing gets snared, but will get that hook down on Diosera. River into the river himself up against Kongyue. Exhaust will come out onto Unified. Both teams looking for just a quick disengage as we're going to have our junglers and bot lane clash here in early game 1.
Yeah, junglers kind of running into each other there. Volibear prominent duelist early, but the Lee Sin Q would have come back up before the execute potential of that bite from the Volibear W was available. Kongyue now has decent tempo for actually making a case for the spot side crab, largely because Uniboy is unlocked on the Zoe, the AHQ mid laner, doing a lot of work already.
That's disgusting coming out from Uniboy. Able to land the bubble into a quick paddle star on the rotation. And he also gets a quick on GLP because he picked it up in lane. So not going to get a kill, but some pressure back there to River.
Yeah, good moving from Uniboy there. Just decides, hey, I'll reinforce our jungler, I'll get some pressure onto the enemy jungler, and suddenly AHQ's early game is looking pretty solid. Granted, it's only 200 gold lead right now, but tempo cannot be underestimated.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we expected, I think, out of this matchup. Zergoth mentioned a couple times that AHQ has looked like such a dominating team when it comes to the first 15 minutes of the game, and you even mentioned PSG might be that kind of team that can kind of weather that storm, but when we saw during that tiebreaker, it just wasn't the case. We never got to see this team ever come online because AHQ never let it happen.
So I do want to look back up at that top lane, actually, because these were the two big standout players when we look at AHQ and PSG. Well, until like the last week of the regular split, where we decided, okay, these are not top side teams anymore. These are junglers and mid laners dictating everything for the rest of the map. But Ziv and Hanabi, this Gnar into Renekton isn't actually going all too hot for the Gnar. Yes, he's ahead, but only by like 3 CS. It should be way more than that. And if Renekton can stun you, the Gnar E actually returns you to the point of origin if you have it cancelled midway through the hop.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big feels bad just seeing that right there from Hanabi. He's not even able to get 3 stacks onto the Renekton. If you're able to do that, you can get a really good trade back in your favor, but we just haven't seen it, and Ziv's been playing that matchup rather well, at least in the early game.
Honestly, I'm pretty happy with the fact Ziv is already making it through this lane, as we said, nigh unscathed. Even goes press the attack for additional gank setup, and tank out of mana, but still applying the pressure.
Yeah, he saw Uniboy was coming around. I was a little bit concerned there for tank, but realized both mid laners did not have mana. But it may have been just to keep him nearby. He will spot this out on reward. At least I hope he did. Level 6 comes out from tank. Still doesn't have a whole lot of mana, though. River was coming down the lane. And there won't be much else happening here, as River's just going to make sure that this doesn't get just crashed into the tower.
Yeah, unfortunately, Uniboy in no real position to fight there, so the AHQ early 2v2 advantage that Volibear kind of lends to you when playing against another melee jungler, a little bit out of the window for now. You just have Kongyue holding this, it means the bot lane from PSG can start to think about pushing back or fishing for a pick, and it means Hanabi is free to farm and actually try and cheat a recall against Ziv.
I'll try to do it himself, but other than that, it's been rather quiet. No real big advantages other than just that minion wave pickup from tank, as it gets him about 2 waves up ahead, Uniboy. But we do see whether or not Kongyue is going to be able to actually look to gank this bot lane, because once again, we mentioned that Caitlyn and that Lux, you're looking to try and get them ahead during this early game. But this is a different kind of identity that we're not used to seeing from AHQ, and unfortunately, it's just not really panning out here in the first couple minutes.
Conversely, I'm a little bit disappointed to see PSG's bot lane just anchored to that lane for the first 7 minutes. They usually move a little bit earlier. As you mentioned, Kaiwing's stats, he moves around the map a lot, and yet because of that, they've set up good defensive vision around that immediate area. But because of that, they're not leaving bot lane. They're not putting wards up in the river, up in the Drake pit. Instead, they're just staying there, safe, but not really contesting anything.
As you see there, that's going to be first dragon secured by AHQ. Going to get themselves an Infernal. We'll see whether or not they're able to actually find themselves possibly a play on toward the top side of the map. But Civ, different idea, kind of realizing something feels a little bit strange, and at least just hug back to that second tier tower in case River is nearby.
Yeah, very, very good read from Ziv there, just to kind of chill back, kind of chance out a dive, and honestly now Hanabi is growing a sizable CS lead, 3 waves up, but Ziv honestly at this point very happy just to live through the lane phase. Ninja Tabi for both top laners, they're both very respectful of each other, and the fact both of these early game dueling junglers are AD does lend a lot of credence to that. A bit of an invade, bit of a counter, bit of a Uniboy diving.
Nice coming, level 6 here is able to get that bubble not to connect onto Unified. Just gets a little bit aggressive, and it actually forces out a flash out of Kaiwing, so the Thresh has to pay some respect. You saw Tank and River looking for a rotate, but they're a little bit late to the party. In the end, they'll just get the single summoner out of the bot lane of PSG.
Yeah, unfortunately, the only champion that bubble hits is Kane when he's traveling through the wall, as that did go fairly off of the side of the map. Uniboy, solid roam, very brave of him to come from behind the tower, and Tank attempting to follow was just a little bit delayed because nature of the game when you are having to deal with a mid that is pushing into you. Good recall from Civ here. Again, it's not really a cheater because he will lose. You have to imagine at least one extra wave for it, but you take what chances you can get in this matchup to really pressure some sort of an advantage back in your favor.
And I'll be frank too, the times when we have seen Hanabi get ahead, the thing about PSG is they're very much a team that has shown multiple times that even when Hanabi gets ahead and gets some resources, they don't necessarily play through him. So I don't really feel like he's a threat yet until we actually see some action come out of this squad.
And I think a lot of that is why A, we're seeing the GP so valuable for PSG because he kind of makes himself into a threat later on, and B, it's why the Quinn fell flat so heavily because the team can't play with that early pressure maybe as much as we'd like to see. Speaking of early pressure...
Oh, yeah, Sarah. Gotta be a little bit careful. Could get comboed there by Tank. Civ pops a Dominus, wants to join in onto the fight. That's gonna be Unleashed Power going back in onto the Renekton. They're not able to steal away. Meanwhile, Uniboy, though, able to land the damage. River gets himself back to the Blasting Cone to keep himself safe. Uniboy picks up a Flash, but they do prevent the Rift Herald from actually being secured by PSG, so a nice job there from AHQ.
Yeah, good response from AHQ there, and they can transition this pressure into a mid lane push. I do want to touch on the fact that we have no cleanse from Wako, so it does mean the Ash Arrow could ring true if PSG want to pick a re-engage of their own. And as well as that, another option that I do want to touch on is that Ysera went for Guardian on Lux, which is now more standard compared to the Aftershock, but it means that if Tank is ever in range of him, the Lux is just going to get 100-0.
Can we also mention, too, that Waka, well, I mentioned it briefly. I think before even our pre-show, we were talking about the bot lane in particular in this matchup. Waka, it's just dominating as far as lane goes. Look at this, 105 to 76 CS. Unified, we mentioned that Wako is extremely consistent and rarely falls behind in lane, but it's rare we actually see him get a massive lead like this.
I think that's also the narrative we ran with for Unified. He has, you know, his fair share of decent early games at times, but he largely just shows up in team fights, and yet he's getting handled insanely well by Wako here, and yeah, it is testament to how lane dominant and low-key just insane Wako has been.
We'll see. Wako is going to be likely running into that Infinity Edge first, and maybe we'll see the Storm Razor second, as he does have lethal tempo for that attack speed. We'll see what his plan is going to be, as we do start to see some of our first item backs, at least component-wise. Lost Chapters in mid lane, Kindle Gem online for Hanabi, going to likely run into the Black Cleaver instead of the Bork Forest, which we were kind of wondering to see whether or not he would try and run that up against two melee tanks on the top side of the map.
Yeah, I am curious if this Renekton also opts for a Black Cleaver, by the way, because while it is good at, of course, shredding armor, it lends a lot of all-in potential as well. It's not my favorite. I think Blade is a little bit better for actually closing the gap onto ranged champs, but ranged champs getting gaps closed onto them could be the name of the game here.
Well, I see bot lane, jungle's going to show, River's also nearby, but other than that, both of them just kind of peace out, and for PSG, River has had this tendency, especially when he's on something like a Lee Sin, where we don't actually get to see a whole lot of action from him. For me, though, Kanye, the fact that he hasn't been able to translate any pressure into a kill just yet, and we're 12 minutes into the game, looks rather suspect compared to what we've seen in previous performances of AHQ.
Definitely is the case, but at the same time, the man ate 5 jungle bans and 1 extra one from his team.
True.
Give him a little bit of slack here. Just, yeah, it's Volibear. He did some early dueling, and at the same time, you do consider it a minor success that you've also kind of shut down whatever playmaking the Lee Sin has opted into. Now, I believe we'll see both teams clash for this Drake. Issue being that Unified at this moment in time, not dealing any damage, so Tank will have to carry PSG if this team is actually going to make a contest for this objective.
Well, he does have Ludens now online for Tank, but we're still waiting about 2 levels until we hit that, you know, magic level 2 ultimate power spike with your first item, which does a truckload of damage. And it looks like PSG even getting zoned away here by Ysera, as well as the trap placement coming out from Wako. That's going to be Enchanted Crystal Arrow into the Death Sentence alongside the Q from River. That's going to be first blood going on over to Kaiwing. Hanabi onto the backside into the pit, is able to get some damage and force Wako to get himself over the wall to safety. Civ went for a teleport, popped the Dominus, wasn't able to get much else. Kaiwing looking for the flash hook, maybe a little bit too gutsy to start things off here in your first game of play, first game of the best of 5 here in playoffs, and Uniboy's able to just walk away.
Yeah, ref flub from Kaiwing on the back end of that, but PSG, they get a single pick. Ysera gets hooked, gets locked down by the arrow as well, and yet AHQ are the ones that walk away with the Drake. You saw Gnar TP in, he had no Mega, he was a ranged minion at that point, and PSG, they try for more, but end up losing the objective anyway.
And unfortunately there, Kaiwing, he was trying to add to his montage reel of flash hooks we've seen in the PCS this year. Unfortunately wasn't able to connect on the second one. And yeah, like you mentioned, you only given up 1 kill, but that now secures second Drake and gets AHQ in line for the Soul, roughly in about 10 minutes. And in all honesty, it felt like both top laners just kind of teleported in and didn't do a whole lot here.
Yeah, not a huge fan of the fact that Hanabi actually TP'd over the wall there. It meant he had to commit the hop to getting in people's faces, and by the time the HQ disengage came over the wall with the net, nothing to follow up, didn't want to flash, had no Mega. Yeah, both top laners kind of leaving a lot to be decided there as they return to their solo lane to try and farm this one out.
Well, Hanabi was able to at least pick up the Black Cleaver, so we'll see whether or not he's able to do a whole lot now in that lane and try and pressure back Ziv a little bit more. Again, Hanabi was kind of given this nice matchup up into the Renekton, but we haven't really seen it transpire into anything else across the map, and kind of go back into our holding pattern. This is pretty standard for PSG, though. We're not going to see much out of them until probably around now, that 15-minute mark.
And here is where I'm a big fan of the weak side top laners just doing their own thing, because it let Kong Yue actually shadow mid lane for AHQ, and that meant River plus tank, that quick and easy Syndra QE into Lee Sin full combo, couldn't come out to threaten Zoe while she had no flash, and it meant that AHQ actually denied a little bit of the early win condition from PSG. PSG now trying to trade back, but you don't really have all the damage in the world.
There we go, though. Nice rotation into the kick, onto Kongya. Unleash powers there. The ultimate, though, gets him back to safety. Tank flashing on forward. Not able to finish off the kill, though, with the Scour of the Week as the shielding came through for Kongya with the help of the Lux. And like that, PSG commit a lot and not even able to find the kill on the Volibear.
That was the closest thing to a mechanical outplay I've ever seen a Volibear make, and yet it was sick. Lux support damage, not too insane, let's be real. It looked cool, but yeah. End of the day, though, really, really good for AHQ that they did manage to kind of stymie that engage from PSG. That being said, though, a lot of action bot side, despite the fact that Rift Herald number 2 is the next objective in everybody's mind.
Well, at least we're starting to see, though, a little bit of those roams come out from the Ashe as well as the Thresh, like you mentioned you wanted to see. You've gone Essence Reaver, so you're already running 20% cooldown reduction into the build, so we're going to try and use that as most as you can. Hanabi, though, gets caught out by the bubble, ends up going back into Mini, but luckily he gets himself back to safety, but that pressure will translate now into the second Rift Herald for AHQ.
Yeah, the Ashe, 20% CDR, but 0% damage at this stage of the game. Needs to wait it out for her Blade of the Ruined King or her Zeal item into Inveg if you really want to run that kind of route. It means that you are in a position to carry these late game team fights that we continue to mention PSG do trend into, but it means that a lot of the early game skirmish potential, the ability to actually convert on successful picks that you've fished for, very, very limited, because you're basically a one-man show with tank having to deal the lion's share of the damage.
Yeah, and he is at that point now that we expect the Syndra to be able to do a decent amount of damage, but the fact that he wasn't able to really get ahead in his lane, he wasn't kind of funneled any resources, kind of translates to him not being able to kind of carry like he usually does when we did see him back in the Nova series where he was an absolute monster on, say, the Corki. Now, though, PSG able to get a little bit of damage here. Still no first tower. It's almost 17.5 minutes. This is a dreadfully slow game on both sides. But maybe starting to see setup come out from AHQ, as in 30 seconds they'll be looking to try and secure the third dragon of the game, as we do have Mountain Soul.
Yeah, I do want to touch on this AD matchup while they are on our screens, though, because, as we mentioned, Unified going to take some time to come online with this build. However, Caitlyn, It's half of a myth, but also halfway true nowadays that she does still have that fairly hefty mid-game lull, and that 2-item spike for her is not quite as significant as it is for other AD carries. AHQ now popping Herald mid to get some prio for basically free, and then while the enemy team deal with that Herald, you set up vision around the Drake and rotate into the next big play.
It's a heavy engage, though, coming out as Kaiwing's going to get caught out. Has to use the stopwatch. Ash Arrow is going to be used onto Kongya trying to get and disengage. And that's going to be one key ultimate down here for PSG ahead of this possible dragon fight.
Important to note is that top lane TPs are available, but Hanabi just transformed back into Mini Gnar. It means this is, again, a ranged minion for all intents and purposes, and it means PSG, despite, you know, escaping from that initial engage, are in no position to fight this. Ziv is turning the tide!
Able to just rip apart Hanabi. Hanabi doesn't have to use his flash, though, does have the hop to get to safety, but you do see that Renekton, if he's able to close the gap in between him and the Gnar, he's able to do a hefty amount of damage. Wako on top of this is going to get first brick gold funneled in onto this Caitlyn, and on top of already being ahead by 20 CS, he has a plenty amount of turret plating and now that bonus objective gold. And AHQ are in a prime position to start rolling through this game once they secure Mountain Soul.
Yeah, AHQ, very, very solid read of the map there, just to secure objectives, as we said. Using that second Herald to try and snowball into that third Drake. Really beautiful. You cheese mid-prio, you use that mid-prio for free setup, almost convert on a pick to boot as well. And Ziv just winning top lane 1v1 is just unnecessary at this point, but something they're more than happy to walk away with.
Well, you know, if you don't have that annoyance in a side lane of a split-pushing Gnar, and it doesn't drag any of your resources over as long as Ziv can contain them, it comes back to PSG. Once again, they decided to go with this matchup, try and give Hanabi the favorable 1v1. They just haven't really been able to play through him, and other portions of the map just haven't really gone their way. On top of that, too, mid lane, Uniboy has looked fairly consistent so far with his bubbles. We'll see, though, if PSG can find themselves a sneaky invade here over the wall, though Hanabi and the rest of the crew will come, but instantly AHQ bring over the jungle as well as Uniboy. Keeps them safe. Hanabi, though, whacking away at the tower.
Yeah, and again, I attribute a lot of the fact that we see the mid-jungle duo of PSG neutralized to just how well Kongyue and Uniboy are playing this one out currently. Really good counter-aggression coming through from the AHQ mid-jungle duo, and now you see PSG frantically trying to make a play. They're at the blue buff, they're at top lane tier 1, they're trying to play around mid, and yet the map is being pushed on every avenue at this point.
Yeah, you saw Civ getting there to his tier 2, as well as now rotating over. Hanabi has to come deal with it. Kaiwing fishing for the Death Sentence, not going to land, but AHQ, one more wave of siege, and that will net them actually this first tier tower, and Tank gets caught out by a bubble. Uniboy looking to line up the shot with the paddle star, instead decides, all right, you know what, we'll just get ourselves the pressure, take down this tower, and maybe even go for a dive. Kongya over the wall with the Stormbringer, gets Descends into the box immediately underneath the tower, down to about half health, but still, they cannot kill this damn Volley Bear. Hanabi looking for a flank, but he's still a mini Gnar. He hasn't gone into Mega just yet, and by the time he does, it's too late as the fight has been disengaged.
And there is the oppressive mid-game siege. We were saying Zoe and Caitlyn lend to this composition. AHQ, there's no neutral objective on the map, but they're comp because they're ahead. Even if it doesn't maybe look like it on the scoreboard, they're in such a great position that it means they can just cluster mid, group up, and oppressively siege in PSG's faces.
And now comes to a point here with PSG. They kind of have to hope that AHQ are the ones to start making some mistakes, because you have to now factor in 2 minutes from now, AHQ are looking at Mountain Soul, which is a great up against that Syndra burst that you're expecting out of Tank. And in fact, Tank hasn't been able to get out of control from this mid lane. It really feels like this is AHQ's game to lose.
Definitely does seem to be the case here, especially if you get that early Mountain Soul. Not only will it neutralize the pick potential, because of course kills you commit to do take a little bit longer to convert on from PSG if you do secure that for AHQ, but also Syndra can no longer 100-0 someone. Lee Sin will struggle to find whatever limited avenues he already had into the fights anyway, and AHQ shaping up to be in a fantastic position as we are 1 minute away from that win condition.
Do see, though, Wako, instead of opting into the Stormrazor second after the Infinity Edge, decided, all right, go with the Rapid Fire Cannon. I know you're not a huge fan of the Zeal item on the second item back there for the Caitlyn, but do have to factor in, at least they got AHC, have Uniboy that's able to output some decent damage. You also have a support Lux in a sense to actually get a little bit there too.
As well as that, I think I'm okay with it this time around just because it lets Caitlyn safely auto every now and again on a tower from outside of the Syndra response range. Because if you move up, even if Caitlyn has her 625 range or whatever it was, she's in range to be QE'd by the Syndra, like this onto Kongyue.
Do see arrow coming through, not going to find its target, not going to be available here in 30 seconds, as that's going to be Mountain Soul, Drake for AHQ if they're able to find it. Tank, though, has finished off his Banshee, so he just hit himself a nice little power spike here on the Syndra with 2 items, and that Scatter of the Week starting to get some decent damage in. Hanabi with the teleport doesn't have the rage bar all that filled. He actually just went out of it, as you can see that he didn't gain any range from that boomerang, and now gets zoned out. Poor Hanabi can't really do a whole lot, has to deal with the tower. PSG, though, still wanting to try and contest for this Drake.
Yeah, and Hanabi TP'd into that, and yeah, he's already at 25% health. This is
Highway.
doomed.
Uniboy, though, gets caught out toward the side. Ripper can't finish off the fight. Kongyue wanted to jump in onto Unified, but instead decided to go into the pit. Unified, though, unfortunately gets himself back to safety. Hanabi inside the pit as well, able to get himself the Megadar ultimate, and they're able to find a kill. Kongyue is taken down on HQ, but Civ now looking to slice and dice his way through Hanabi and will find himself a kill. A nice double root coming out from the Lux. Unfortunately, HQ cannot translate any further, as Tank still very healthy, and the health bar's low on the side of HQ. River trying to seal it away. Not going to happen, though, as Kongyue is able to secure the dragon through the form of Uniboy, as that is now Mountain Soul secured by AHQ.
AHQ show up, even if that fight was a little bit of a mess. It looks suspect at times, and yet they find their way into it. River lives until the end, gets into the pit, but doesn't get anything for it. Look at that massive opener onto Unified. The Ashe doesn't get to play the team fight. Credit to Unified for actually committing back into this, even though he immediately got chunked out. Uniboy lives somehow. Bubbles come through. Paddle Stars get hit, and yet this Zoe, despite being at 10% health from the get-go, is still actively contributing towards this fight.
And you saw there, Uniboy actually picks up the smite off Kongyue's dead body and is pretty happy himself. He just goes to the wall. He's now the jungle. And AHQ off that are able to secure Mountain Soul, which, there we go. AHQ now in prime position to now kind of roll over this game, as PSG, they have to now fight through these health bars, and they're still down.
Yeah, you're looking at the 2 damage threats of PSG right now. Syndra nullified by that Mountain Soul, as we mentioned, but also consider the fact that Unified on the Ashe, we had our question marks around the fact Wako opted for no cleanse versus this champion, and yet so far we've seen maybe 3 arrows come out and hit members of AHQ, and 2 of them were onto Volibear, 1 of them was onto Lux.
Unfortunately not finding his target, and he's not lucky enough to get Cloud Soul onto the map, so gonna have to wait on those cooldowns. And like we mentioned, yeah, feels like AHQ got themselves the bearings. PSG, this slow game, doesn't pan out well up against HQ. This looks very similar to the game that we saw in the tiebreaker. At least PSG tried to go for a fight at that final 4th Drake, but now team's going to be caught out into an ugly scenario. Ysera gets caught out. Kongyue, though, just goes and pops the ultimate onto the tower. Hanabi gets his rage bar. Nice kick from River onto Uniboy. Uniboy, though, untouched until the Descends connects. Lux ultimate will come out, and that dissuades Uniboy from going on down. Ysera, though, will be taken down as Tank is able to find himself the kill. Civ onto the flank, wants to try and get the stun onto Hanabi, but he can't finish it off. River able to get himself back to safety. Q is going to connect, rejoins in onto the fight. Hanabi finds himself a kill. It's a messy fight, but that is where PSG excel, and they're able to take down 3 members of AHQ.
Overcommitment from the side of AHQ, and they are punished accordingly. Beautiful flank from the Lee Sin, kick to the face, into the backline, into a ton of damage. Yes, it took time to come through because of the questionable builds, but it was still there, and it was enough for PSG to win that fight and maybe take this Baron.
Do you see those health bars, though, a little bit low? You still have a frontline tank in Kongyue that can try and just jump into the pit at the very least. Wako is still about half mana. He can put down traps. Kaiwing, though, able to find his death sentence into the Scour of the Week, and that should be enough to secure Baron for PSG, as Tank does go down to the Baron at the very end, but in the end, it's still PSG with 4 buffs on the table.
Yeah, a little bit of a throw from HQ, you have to imagine there. Just a weird fight to commit to. The trap line in the jungle was almost non-existent, so it meant Hanabi could look for a flank. And then it feels like they say, look, Hanabi's on the bottom side of this, let's zone out the Gnar, neglecting to, kind of note the fact that Lee Sin was also coming around from the top side. Syndra was not in this fight from the beginning, and yet they still somehow managed to lose this one. AHQ, they could have taken a 5v4, could have taken a 5v3, and instead they take multiple 1v1s and just fall down to the pick composition.
And that's the thing, PSG, they love trying to go for these scattered fights, and unfortunately AHQ, you had Wako and Konyu not able to do much else during that Baron secure, and Kaiwing actually able to find his mark with his Death Sends multiple times now in the most recent fights. Starting to come online. On top of that, Unified's been able to get some gold funneled back onto his Ashe, picking up 2 kills from the back end of the fight. And it doesn't look all that bad now for PSG, as they've actually found a little bit of life in there.
Speaking of Unified and the Ashe, by the way, Zergoth is sending really detailed notes throughout the game, and yet I just get a single message saying, why is Ashe going rapid fire cannon on Ashe?
I don't blame him. We gave flack for the seal item. You said Wako was okay. Oh no, River. That's not okay. He'll get taken on down, trying to go for a sneaky flank, but the trap is able to capture its prey, and HQ get a free pick.
Yeah, Tank just building for stats, by the way, at this point on the Syndra, saying, look, I wanted Rabadons, but I need the Blasting Wand to just stat check you harder right now, and I agree with that choice, honestly. It meant that PSG wanted to be as aggressive as possible, as soon as possible, with this Baron buff, and yet because of that, the play blows up in their face. River face checks looking for another sick flank, and then in the end, he's the one that gets sick flanked.
And there you are. That's actually another Baron buff taken away, and PSG haven't been actually able to siege a whole lot. They were able to get that 1 tower, but outside of that, this Baron buff has been a little underwhelming. And it comes back now to this Elder Dragon that will be available now in 30 seconds, and PSG aren't really set up for this, as AHQ already trying to get Vision down.
Yeah, AHQ still have the advantage if they can get Vision around this area. Okay, I thought that was the arrow, but it's just a hawk shot. Nice. PSG now trying to trade back with some vision of their own. They can take a 5v5 if Hanabi has his Rage Bar, which he looks to do so right now.
In good position, can try and jump over the wall. Also got to note, because of the mountain terrain, there's a lot of actual choke points that Hanabi actually excels in with that Mega Gnar ultimate to try and pin down some of these squishy members, especially on a retreat. Civ, though, does caught him out towards the side. Hanabi now going to be forced to go into Mega. 5,000 health onto the Elder Drake. It's going to be the arrow coming back over onto Kongi at 3,000 health. 50-50 smite. Who do you go for? Both at level 13. Ysera, though, gets cut out toward the side, and they're able to find themselves a kill. Kongi gets scattered the weak back by Tank. There goes back into the fit. It's still not enough. River able to secure the Dragon. Hanabi now joining in onto the fight. He goes out of Mega Gnar, and just like that, PSG once again find a fight in their favor, taking down 2 members of AHQ.
Scatter the weak, Lee Sin kick, full disengage onto this follow bed, condemning Kongyue out of that pit, but here's the TP. They're re-engaging this for whatever reason.
Hanabi wants to try and go for a play, but he's half health already by Wako and 2 headshots, so he decides elsewise.
That has happened twice in a row now.
Let's take a look back
TP's
toward
in.
this fight.
Gets Caitlyn, kind of has to awkwardly sit there. Yeah, so again, you start a fight with Hanabi and Mega Gnar. That is never really an ideal situation, but HQ really wanted this Elder. Then here's where the big disengage comes through. Syndra E knocks back the Volibear a little bit. Mild inconvenience. Lee Sin kick sends him flying. You really need to buffer the volley ultimate to immune yourself to that CC. Otherwise, you end up with whatever the heck this was now happening. HQ can't fight the Elder buff PSG, Mountain Soul aside, and that does mean that now Syndra actually executes people in just one single R combo.
And you also have Void Staff completed there from Tank, and likely now going into the Rabadons for his second last item. Also to note, Unified's also been able to pick up his Infinity Edge, now working toward his 3rd BF item as he picked up a BF sword on the tail end of that fight. And you start to see a little bit of the damage coming through from PSG, and that gold graph kind of shows you this game. It feels like, you know, HQ were able to stem the early game and do all right. It felt like their game that they had in hand, that they were to win. But then PSG, these just skirmishes, these scrappy fights, this team can excel in time and time again. HQ just can't handle it, it seems.
Yeah, that one fumble from the overcommitment towards the siege mid lane was what really sealed AHQ's fate for that Baron, which then turned into an Elder, and PSG really using that single winning game state that they found themselves in the course of a 30-minute game to absolutely hammer home what lead they could find.
See here, though, PSG going to go ahead, get the siege. That's going to force the flash out of Ysera. This Lux has been caught out a couple times on the tail end or beginnings of the fight for PSG. That has netted them a kill or two. Like that, though. Second tower in mid, going to get taken. And it turns back into a bit of a reset here. PSG, though, with topside control, could try and translate that into at least setting up toward Baron and forcing AHQ's hand as Wako wants to step up, getting some decent damage off those crits. Have to back off, though, and PSG look to get themselves set up now for the Baron.
Yeah, second Baron of the game, second Baron for PSG potentially, as they do look for it. They have so many ways of keeping the Volibear out of the pit, but Hanabi, no rage bar, HQ, this is your moment.
Again, Hanabi just not set up for these fights. Kanye just jumps into the pit, wants to have fun himself. Lux ultimate comes on through. The kick and the help from the Baron is able to take down Kanye as he gets a little bit too excited trying to force the fight. PSG now with a man advantage.
Hanabi got the rage, got the flash, can get the fight if PSG want it, but the picks are coming through. Bubble.
Woo! You saw Paddlestar taking River down to half health. Uniboy looking to try and line up another one. In comes Ace in the hole, able to tag tank. Hanabi's going to go back to base. And with enough poke coming out from Uniboy once again on this Zoe, it's enough to force PSG back, and HQ able to live another day.
Yeah, AHQ really happy they didn't lose the Baron off of that. And honestly, they've done a fairly alright job of stalling out that Elder Dragon. Now just looking to scale up, get to a point where they can reliably close this one out when Caitlyn has her LDR or her Mortal Reminder, probably LDR because where's the healing on this comp? And now we're also looking for the Void stuff that's already been completed for Uniboy. So AHQ definitely in a good position to fight once they have core items completed, and we're seeing kind of an artificial mid-game lull for the Caitlyn, just a little bit later than we're used to, as we do have PSG recognize that.
There you go, though. PSG once again going to start this off. Unified's got to be careful, though. Doesn't really have any lifesteal in his build, and likely is just relying on the precision tree to try and give that to him. Wako fails the Caliber net over the mountain terrain, which is kind of unfortunate, but HQ once again able to prevent PSG from really trying to do anything with this Baron, and that's given time now for HQ if they wanted to try and set up towards now this second Elder Drake.
That aside, shout out to Wako for actually just keeping this Gnar out of the fight for a majority of these team fights. Every time Hanabi TP'd in, every time Hanabi tried to find creative angle into these fights, quick headshot, 1-2 tap to the face, and the Gnar is in no position to fight. Now, however, PSG, fantastic position to fight. Elder in 1 minute, Baron up now, HQ making the play.
HQ are the ones that say, we want to try and do something, and River, he gets tagged out. That's going to be Crucible coming out from Kaiwing. Not going to have that for the ensuing fight. Meanwhile, Civ is able to eat up the arrow, but Tang's damage coming out into another Death Sentence. Unleash power on the Kanye, able to take him down low, but Wako's able to find Hanabi at the tail end of the engage. And there you go, PSG without the frontline tank, but Kanye very low if he wants to try and continue this. Uniboy fishing for Paddle Stars, but AHQ immediately try and reset back to base.
Yeah, PSG trying to get mid-prio here while they know that HQ are resetting so they can delay the potential Baron take. Do HQ hard commit for the Baron themselves right now? Potentially, but it looks like they're just going to be full utility defensive vision line. Maybe we see a 1-for-1 trade on the Elder for the Baron, but I do wonder which team prioritizes which objective.
And we take a look back here. Civ is able to eat up the Crystal Arrow, and it looks good here for PSG. Looks like they're going to burst down this Volibear, but the damage starting to come online for HQ. Actually takes out Hanabi, and he's still down for another 10 seconds.
Yeah, Kongyue had no access to that ultimate for the majority of that fight. That's why you saw the full disengage, and that's why you see the full re-engage. Trap line is up.
Trap line up. 1 second now on Hanabi. Had teleport available if he wants to join in onto the fight, but he does not have any rage because he just respawned. He's still going to try and make it play happen as he jumps in, immediately gets rooted into another stair. He's going to be able to get himself back to the safety. Unified almost gets taken on down. Ace of the hole going to only connect onto River. 3,000 health onto the Dragon. Does River try and go for the steal? It looks like it's not going to be the case as AHQ are able to secure Elder.
Yeah, Lee Sin casually getting 1v1 by the Zoe while we were looking at Hanabi's suspect TP. The Gnar comes in onto a trap, onto a chunk of his health just missing right out the gate, and it means that the carries from AHQ can take full control of that chaos, can find their picks, can put out their damage, and now look for a Baron play off of that Elder.
And he thought Uniboy was scary with some of the damage he had, even though he's 1-1 in 3. One full Paddle Star, not even without the bubble, is going to take you down to about half health. And with Elder, that's going to be an easy execute. Unified, though, is the one to make the call and say, hey, I want to go into the mid lane. River maybe can try and find a steal himself, but immediately gets taken on down. PSG in shambles at this point. Tank tries to steal the Baron. It's not going to happen. Scar of the Week comes back. Unified, though, pushing it onto the base.
Yeah, can you get the mid inhib before the Renekton gets you? Signs point to no here, as Unified just on full disengage from here on out. TP flank now in, as you do have the PSG AD carry in no man's land.
Unfortunately, Unified going to try and go for a kill on Giacera if he could. Unfortunately, doesn't flash over the wall, and he'll get taken down as the shutdown goes on over to Ziv.
Oh!
Minions
actually finishing off that mid lane power play, though. It is a small trade, but it is a trade back. AHQ, however, I think they can end off of this push if they can find another pick. So this fight, 4v5, because, yeah, Ashe is mid, as you do. Just solid call to say, look, we don't want to actually skirmish this, instead just go for the Miracle Steal. But because they're not super coordinated, because they're playing against a disengage heavy pick comp, River gets Zoe'd.
And simple as that. Uniboy, we mentioned back in spring, he had something like a 38 KDA because of this champion for the first 3 weeks of the season. And again, may not be insane at this point as far as the numbers go, but still a heavy threat. And like you mentioned, AHQ are looking to finish off things. Snare lands in onto River. First Nexus Tower going to get taken down. Descends onto Civ. He's in Dominus. He doesn't care.
Can transform.
Hanabi looking for a transform, looking for a flank. Some decent low health bars. Wako gets caught out. River with the kick. They get the shutdown off the Caitlyn. And now Civ is caught out in trouble. He gets pushed on back. Ysera gets taken down. PSG look to hold the base. Uniboy, though, able to take out River. And he's coming back with the cooldown. Civ low, but they're not able to finish off the Renekton. Tank going down low himself has to pace out because Uniboy with one more auto, one more Paddle Star combo, it'll be enough to take him down.
Elder?
Tank, though, Elder, it's dissipated. They can't get the execute, and PSG hold.
PSG weather that storm, the Baron buffed, super minions crashing in, and yet they live through it all. AHQ, good aggressive play, good attempt at a pick, and yet with all of these skill shots missing, with all of their damage committed into thin air, not a whole lot they can do here. Unified even respawns by the time this fight does start to play out, and suddenly this is not a 5v5 you want to opt into. The arrow onto this cleanseless Wako, who hasn't even opted for QSS yet. You have Mikhail's on the Lux, but it was on CD, and that is just not a good look for AHQ.
PSG, they're able to find a hold. Unfortunately for them, the Elder Drake just timed out now, so Tank is actually extremely lucky. That's why Uniboy was going so aggressive over here trying to finish off the kill. If he was able to get it, maybe they can actually take the base completely. But PSG, they're able to live for another day. Baron is now going to dissipate, and we might have to wait out for another couple minutes on to the next objective.
Looking at the inventories right now, this Ashe is still dealing not as much damage as I would maybe be comfortable with, of course. QSS plus GA, about as defensive as you can get. Unified, however, his job isn't to be the primary carry source. He is just reinforcing Tank and River while they try to find some of the backline access that we haven't really seen so far. Speaking of River, by the way, backline access, that kick is all he's good for at the moment because he is full tank, full utility, Lee Sin.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's there for the odd Dragon Steal, possibly, if they're able to find it, which he has done before. Multiple times in clutch scenarios when the team has needed him to step up, he has been able to find the objective, but without that engage, it can be rather difficult for this team to actually find the kills necessarily. AHQ going to go ahead and clean up the rest of the map while they can, try and get as much gold before this next Elder fight that will be happening here within the next 90 seconds.
Yeah, AHQ need to set up a trap line, need to get some good vision for Uniboy to find a bubble out of Fog of War, and then it's really, really difficult for PSG to face check into them. Even if this Lee Sin is full tank, even if Thresh is getting fairly hefty now, Na'Tu, it's all armor for everybody, and that means that they are still going to get shredded by a fairly formidable Zoe pick in the mid lane of AHQ.
So there we go, AHQ. Just go ahead, get vision down. Hanabi unfortunately pops his rage bar, but we'll have 40 seconds to actually build that back up once again in for the next fight. Civ is in the top side of the map just trying to get some pressure. Kong was thinking about maybe going for an engage. Unified, though, almost gets one shot by a paddle star from Uniboy. And that's the thing, this Zoe is lethal. And Wako and Ysera, they're not afraid to try and hunt down Hanabi as they force PSG back.
Unsurprisingly, the carries of AHQ
no.
45 minutes into the game deal damage. Merc Treads. Merc Treads pretty good against Zoe, let's be real. Kaiwing, yeah.
It's getting a little bit scary here if you're PSG. Hanabi does have teleport. He needs to try and build up his rage bar. Instead, he's going to go back to base, wants the home guards instead, but if he teleports like we saw in the previous fight, without a rage bar being built up, it feels rather lackluster.
Elder?
And especially
Elder's
in
being
this
done.
pit that has mountain terrain. And Elder was started up by Ziv a long time ago. Ripper on the other side of the wall. He wants to try and find a steal. Only lands the Q over onto Ziv. Hanabi, though, he's left out to dry. That's 5 members. Wako almost gets caught out, but he's able to cleanse it right on the frame. Ysera able to get some damage. They take down the Gnar, but in response, they take down Ysera. But the massive paddle star damage coming out from Uniboy carries the fight. And PSG, they're left to rot as AHQ look to close out game 1.
That paddle star did 2/3 of 3 people's health. PSG clump, PSG get punished, and we don't even need to see the second Elder for AHQ. They can just end off of this one, off of their mid lane power play, off of Uniboy Zoe winning this game for them.
And that mid lane threat we expected to come out of tank. Unfortunately, though, Uniboy's on the other side of the map alongside Kongi. That mad team duo able to help lead the charge here in game 1 up against PSG as they look to take hold of the series off the first game 1-0.
1-0. There.
Even flashing the Mad Team. Even flashing the Mad Team logo. There you go.
Oh, man.
Oh, boy. With that, though, we are going to go ahead and come back on over to our analyst desk, and rejoining us, of course, is Zergoth. And Mr. Zergoth, I see one of your notes there. You say, Uniboy's really damn good at Zoe.
Yeah, I think Uniboy, I was writing it down. I was actually writing down a complete performance analysis of both teams, and it's just basically the Uniboy show at this point. Even though it doesn't entirely show on the scoreboard, I think Uniboy secured them just so many early objectives, poking out the Lee Sin, poking out the Gnar, just constantly looking aggressively with the Zoe, which is one thing that's really hard to execute on. He is in a matchup that's like 50-50 in the beginning, but it depends on how it goes. He rushes the Merc threat, just says, I'm gonna farm it out because I'm gonna perform later on anyways on the Zoe, and he just makes it a show. Honestly, it's just Uniboy is so good on the Zoe. I think PSG should consider banning it for sure.
Yeah, we take a look at some of these fights here, and this was AHQ again, looking to secure the game here. And Braze, you said it yourself, your reaction said enough here when Uniboy is able to chunk down 3 members of PSG in a choke point.
Look at this, look at this. Look, here it is, here it is, here it is, here it is. Here's
And
2/3 of
boom.
everybody's health. Whoa, that was sick. That won the fight. It's over. And yeah, never really had the chance to see too much damage come out of really either carry on the side of PSG. Like when we saw the Syndra ult, it was usually onto the Volibear, which to be fair, essentially same as Zoe poking out the Lee Sin, but with a much longer cooldown. And then yeah, the Ashe questionable build. I know Zergoth, you particularly were a little bit confused by some of the choices.
I think specifically the crit build in the beginning, I thought to myself, this build isn't that great, but when I saw it more work out in the game, the way they were playing it, they were using it as setup for the Thresher to land, to the Syndra combo to land, which I think is decently smart, but the Mountain Soul kind of countered that win condition, so to speak. The Syndra couldn't really find any proper picks due to the tankiness of AHQ's front line, and I think the Blade Ruin King would have served well in shredding that front line, but in the end I was relatively okay with it. What I wasn't okay with was the Lee Sin build this game.
I wasn't okay with...
into Randuin. Let's go.
I also just wasn't okay with River in general. I felt like he rather underperformed this game pretty heavy-handedly. Even the fact that his Thresh is only 3,000 damage behind him on this chart.
Yes, I think River overall, I felt like PSG's win condition in the early game was to look for fights on mid, actually proactively look for kills, and then snowball that pressure into just trying to punish the enemy bot lane. But because they weren't being proactive on mid lane, Tank was getting poked out, River was getting poked out without being together, they couldn't find any windows in the mid lane, and so this Lee Sin just got completely outskilled. I still would have liked to see the Black Cleaver, because I think with the Black Cleaver you can still look for a bit more damage with the combo. You can shred the enemy front line and then go into the Renduin's Omen and look for more pressure onto the Caitlyn. But I think with the Knight's Vow you're just almost dead weight, and the Knight's Vow doesn't do much because the enemy team doesn't have a consistent DPS comp that you can fight with the Knight's Vow, but it has really heavy burst. It's looking to get these picks with the CC, with the Volibear stun, with the Lux Brood, into a Caitlyn combo, into just everything just drop at once, and the Knight's Vow doesn't do that much against it.
Well, you do see, though, I think we're unanimous when it comes to this agreement. MVP for Game 1 is going to be Uniboy on his Zoe, 5-1-6 with 91% kill participation and 32% damage share. It felt like a whole lot more, but in the end, AHQ, I think they're going to be relatively happy with that performance. The early game looked rather well. I think it was just those little mid-game shakeups during those really scrambled fights that PSG are known to succeed in.
Yeah, that one overcommitment mid that PSG were able to snowball into a Baron play, into the Elder as well. Just really, really beautiful play from PSG to try and come back from that. Unfortunately, not enough to stop them from getting 1v9'd by the Zoe later on, but the idea was there. Again, also though, we had our fair share of criticism towards River, towards some invisible carries as well, but Hanabi's Gnar, with those TPs, onto the Caitlyn trap, time and time again.
I know we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that, but for now, we're going to go ahead and take a short break. When we come back, though, Game 2 between AHQ and PSG.
CTBC Bank is Taiwan's top financial institution, but we're not stopping there. We're crafting an international brand and already have over 260 outlets in 14 countries. We are by your side, ready to embrace the future.